is also very much dependent on the distance or the density, which is better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So pretty much you're going to have a similar result.
Yeah.
Now that you've seen the single line Perspex test, so obviously now you do realize the added advantage of using the Multiline. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between the Hifu Monoline or single line and the Hifu Multiline. Now, we have already discussed that in quite detail. However, we're making this video because we like approaching the same topics from different angles. So things, even before you buy, before you choose what type of Hifu you'd like to use in your clinic, you've got a clearer understanding of the differences, advantages and disadvantages. The main disadvantage of a Hifu Multiline is that is slightly more expensive than the single line. But we're actually gonna, first of all, we're gonna look again at what the intensity of the treatment is by using Hifu treatments, Hifu devices. So the intensity of the treatment is not determined only or solely only by the power level of the dots that you're firing. It's also very much dependent on the distance or the density, which is better, the density between those dots that you're firing. So the denser, keeping the power level the same, the denser the dots, the less the distance between the dots, the more intense the treatment. Whereas the further away the dots from each other, the less intense the treatment. So this is actually, we've actually made a video on this, but it's just as a recap, because many people have asked us how many shots should I fire per treatment, and that's dependent on the intensity of the treatment, and also if you're using a single line, a Hifu single line, it is also dependent on how much the client wants to pay. And so this is why it's very, very important to understand the intensity of the treatment, so of the Hifu treatment, because it's not only dependent on the power level, it's also dependent on the density of the spots. So now it's quite tricky. So in the example that we have made before, when we actually say, let's assume we set the Hifu single line to have a distance between the spots of 1.5 millimeters. Again, 1.5 millimeter, the distance between the spots. So say for example, if I fire it this way, fire the lines this way, if the distance between the dots is 1.5 millimeters, I have to make sure that if I want to do things extremely precisely, and there's no need for it anyway, that I fire the shot, the line, and then I displace exactly horizontally the cartridge by 1.5 millimeters. I fire another shot, and perfectly, I displace the cartridge perfectly horizontally by 1.5 millimeters up until I've reached the end of the square. And obviously, as we have seen, this is impractical to actually realize this perfect distribution of the dots by using a single line. And because it is quite difficult, it's almost impossible. However, everything is possible if you really, really try hard. Then what we actually told you to do is to divide the number of shots, the number of lines by half, and place the lines with a single line this way. Say for example here, if we need to fire, I don't know, say 20 lines, you'll actually fire 10 lines this way and another 10 lines that way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So pretty much you're going to have a similar result. But with a single line, the distribution is never going to be even. Now, this is where the multi-line, and before we go into the multi-line, let's show you a perspex test with the single line. That's what you get. I'm going to, now that you've seen the single line perspex test, now what if we can actually tell the software exactly how to space these dots both vertically and horizontally? Now, if we can do that, then it saved us a lot of trouble, especially in determining the intensity of the treatment. So, and this is exactly what the multi-line device does. It actually allows us to determine with accuracy those distances between the spots, and therefore the intensity of the treatment, keeping the power level of those dots the same. So obviously now you do realize the added advantage of using the multi-line, because basically all you have to do is just you set up the software to do what you tell it to do, and the device will do the rest. So you place that cartridge on the face or body, and you know exactly how many dots have been fired, and then you displace it exactly by, in this case, as you know, if you watched our training videos on the multi-line, you know that the maximum length horizontally is 11 or 12 millimeters and vertically is 25 millimeters. So if you've actually set it up to fire exactly at 11 millimeters, you have to displace it. Once the device has fired the dots, then you have to displace it exactly by 11 millimeters, if you want it to be exact. But these sort of things are not an exact science anyway. So even if you overlap the dots a bit, nothing is going to happen. If they're a bit apart, nothing is going to happen. It's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to influence that terribly the results. So hopefully, and then now, but before we go and draw our conclusions, let's watch a perspex test on the Hifu Multiline. So now you have a better idea of why the Hifu Multiline is a huge improvement over the single line. It helps you not a little, but a lot, because number one, you're able to actually perform the treatment much faster, and you're able, by configuring only configuring the software, determine the intensity of the treatment. So because obviously you determining the power level, but also the distance between the dots, both vertically and horizontally. And it's quite precise, because then you can go and check it with your perspex. So it does really work. So hopefully this video has been of use to you, and as usual we want to approach the same concept from different angles, so it's going to be much easier for you to have an understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of certain devices versus others. And this is what we pride ourselves about, actually make that a very clear picture, so when it comes to make your decision, you know what you're going for and why. So many thanks from Andreas Russo, and we'll see you next time.